On a day steeped in centuries of faith, a day marked by a singular ethereal memory, the anniversary of the Fatima apparition, a message of profound gravity pierced the quiet of the church. It was not a whisper, nor a subtle hint, but a bold proclamation, echoing across the Atlantic from a hushed sanctuary. The voice belonged to Cardinal Raymond Burke, and his words were a stark, unflinching warning of betrayal, of deep-seated deception, and of a sacred message from heaven, a divine directive that he contended had been stubbornly ignored for more than 100 years. Yet, beneath the surface of his powerful rhetoric lay something even more disquieting, a truth so profound and unsettling that most people, even within the sacred halls of the church, are simply too afraid to utter it aloud. Stay with us and listen until the very end to truly understand the chilling implications of this unspoken reality. Imagine, if you will, the vast, intricate tapestry of the Catholic Church woven over 2 millennia with threads of devotion, sacrifice, and divine revelation. Now picture a delicate yet crucial thread, seemingly overlooked, perhaps even deliberately frayed, in the quiet corners of the weave. This is the essence of the warning. In a time when the Church often appears to be retreating into a cautious silence, grappling with internal divisions and external pressures, one voice has consistently cut through the noise with startling clarity. That voice, resonant with conviction and steeped in traditional wisdom, belongs to Cardinal Burke. The setting was humble, almost stark. It was during a mass held to commemorate the momentous events of July 13th at Fatima, within the quiet confines of a sanctuary in New Jersey, only half filled with the devout. Yet, from this unassuming place, Cardinal Burke delivered a message that few, if any, within the inner circles of the Vatican would ever dare to articulate aloud. He described with unvarnished honesty a troubling truth, that the Church, subtly, almost imperceptibly, is slowly, practically turning away from Christ. This spiritual drift, he asserted, leads inevitably to confusion, to falsehood, and ultimately to destruction. Cardinal Burke's words struck like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the shadows. He spoke unflinchingly about church leaders living in ways that starkly contradicted the very faith they claimed to represent, leaders who seemed to exhibit a greater loyalty to a world steeped in confusion and shifting sands than to the unchanging, liberating truth of the gospel. And that, he made clear, was just the beginning. Those few who were present recalled him pointing towards something even more sensitive, more deeply guarded, the chilling possibility that the Fatima message, in its entirety, may be far more serious, more profoundly urgent than what has ever been officially shared with the faithful. Though Cardinal Burke, with characteristic discretion, never named specific individuals, those intimately familiar with the intricate nuances of church affairs could easily discern the pointed message beneath his measured words. He did not speak vaguely or in abstract generalities. His remarks were laden with profound meaning for anyone with the courage and spiritual insight to look deeper, to see beyond the surface. Many were left unsettled, pondering just how far the Vatican, the very heart of the Church, might have subtly drifted from the true, unvarnished message of Fatima. This was no soft-spoken homily, designed merely to inspire a gentle sense of piety or to encourage passive prayer. It was a serious, urgent warning, a direct, undeniable challenge to a church that, under the current pontificate of Pope Leo, appears, to Burke and many like him, more focused on maintaining a fragile peace with the world than on reverently honoring heaven's urgent, persistent call. But what stood out, perhaps even more powerfully than the potent message itself, was the chilling silence that enveloped it. Last Sunday, as Cardinal Burke stood virtually alone at the altar, speaking with audacious openness about the lies, the pervasive confusion, and even the dark tendrils of violence that he claimed had subtly entered sacred places, Not a single other major bishop or prominent church leader was present in support. Not one. That quiet, conspicuous absence painted a powerful, almost heartbreaking picture. A single elderly cardinal, standing by himself, daring to speak an inconvenient truth honestly and fearlessly before a people who increasingly feel left without clear spiritual direction, and before a leadership that acts as though nothing is fundamentally amiss. During his sermon, Cardinal Burke did not speak about apostasy in vague or distant theological terms. He made it piercingly real, painfully immediate. He stated plainly that there are individuals within the highest echelons of the Church, people who may not openly declare heresy with their lips, but who, by their undeniable actions and their lived choices, have unmistakably turned their backs on the radiant truth. They deny, through their very behavior, the boundless love and the illuminating light that flows inexorably from the wounded heart of Christ and intimately connected through the Immaculate Heart of Mary. His message pulled no punches. There was no attempt to appease anyone, no softening of uncomfortable truths, and in doing so, he reminded us of something we now rarely witness: truth spoken clearly, without fear, without compromise, without concern for personal cost. Cardinal Burke didn't limit his sharp observations to high-ranking church leaders alone. He also pointed to a wider, more pervasive problem. Bishops, priests, entire religious communities, and even ostensibly devout lay people who, while speaking eloquently of love and tolerance, subtly live in a way that aligns far more closely with the fleeting values of the secular world than with the timeless, radical demands of Christ. At that small, unassuming shrine in New Jersey, he reminded everyone, especially those who consciously chose not to attend, that Fatima is not a sweet, comforting story for the overly pious or the sentimental. It is, he stressed, a serious, urgent warning carrying profound implications for both the Church and the turbulent world at large. One topic, like a ghost in the shadows, stirred quietly around the edges of the entire event, though it was never explicitly mentioned in Cardinal Burke's powerful homily: the enduring, unsettling mystery of the third secret of Fatima. To this very day, it remains a persistent source of deep disagreement, disquiet, and even palpable unease, even among the most senior leaders within the Church. Officially, the third secret was dramatically made public in the year 2000. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who would later ascend to the chair of Peter as Pope Benedict XVI, released a formal document describing a powerful, almost apocalyptic vision. In it, a pope walks through a devastated city, surrounded by ruins and littered with corpses, before being brutally killed alongside countless bishops, priests, and ordinary believers. The scene was undeniably dramatic, chilling in its vividness. Yet the Vatican swiftly explained it as symbolic, referring to the widespread persecution of Christians during the tumultuous 20th century, particularly the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II. Still, many remained profoundly unconvinced. Some respected experts and deeply informed church figures quietly believed that what had been shared was only a partial revelation, a carefully edited fragment of the true, complete message. Others suggested even more daringly that something crucial had been left out altogether. One of the most vocal skeptics was Father Ingo Dollinger, a close personal friend of Cardinal Ratzinger. He claimed with significant credibility that Ratzinger had once confided in him personally that the publicly released version was, indeed, incomplete. According to Dollinger, the part that was conspicuously left out described something even more troubling, more directly relevant to the current state of the Church: a stark warning about a future council, widely understood to be Vatican II, and a subsequent, flawed version of the Mass that would have deep, lasting, and profoundly damaging consequences for the Church. Back when these unsettling claims first began to spread, the Vatican quickly issued a formal, emphatic response. They strongly denied any suggestion whatsoever that parts of the third secret had been withheld, stating unequivocally that everything, in its entirety, had already been made public. But even with that forceful official answer, the doubts never fully faded away. Questions continue to linger to this very day, like an unresolved chord in a sacred symphony. A number of respected bishops and influential theologians continue to argue, often privately but sometimes publicly, that the real complete secret may contain direct, specific warnings about the pervasive theological confusion and the often disorienting liturgical changes that undeniably followed the Second Vatican Council. Some even believe that, because of the perceived risk of causing widespread scandal or deep division within the faithful, crucial parts of that urgent message may have been deliberately kept hidden, locked away. In this charged and complex context, Cardinal Burke's strong, unyielding words and his long-standing, unwavering focus on Fatima take on a profound, urgent new meaning. He may be, through his steadfast advocacy, urging the Church not only to reflect deeply on the messages that were courageously shared, but also, and perhaps more importantly, to finally confront what might have been deliberately left unsaid. One of the most talked about and often most controversial parts of the Fatima message, something Cardinal Burke has brought up consistently throughout his distinguished ministry, is the specific, precise request made by the Virgin Mary concerning the nation of Russia. According to Sister Lucia, one of the 3 young Fatima visionaries, Our Lady explicitly asked for a special, unique act to be performed. The Pope himself, joined by all the bishops of the world, together in a single, unified moment, were to solemnly dedicate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. If this act was performed precisely as requested, Mary promised, it would lead to Russia's spiritual conversion and, remarkably, usher in a lasting period of peace for the entire world. It was not a vague, symbolic, or open-ended request. It was clear, direct, and came with an astonishingly powerful, concrete promise. Over the past century, several popes have indeed attempted acts of consecration. While many of these were undoubtedly sincere efforts, none of them, critically, followed the exact, precise instructions given at Fatima. Instead of naming Russia specifically, or involving all the bishops together at the very same time, these acts were often broader in scope, consecrating the world, or were done without the explicit, full coordination of every bishop. For example, Pope Pius XII, in 1942, consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And again in 1952, he offered a special prayer for Russia. However, crucially, the consecration was not done in unified communion with all the bishops, and it was not the exact, precise act requested by heaven. Then, in 1984, Pope John Paul II performed another consecration of the world, which was spiritually powerful and deeply moving, but once again, it conspicuously stopped short of naming Russia directly. Many believe he consciously chose not to mention Russia by name, due to the extraordinarily tense political climate at the time. The Cold War was still raging, and such a direct gesture might have been perceived as unduly provocative or severely damaging to delicate diplomatic efforts. More recently, in 2022, Pope Francis led a global prayer in which both Russia and Ukraine were named in a consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. While this prayer was profoundly moving and garnered worldwide attention, it was not officially declared by the Vatican as the definitive fulfillment of the specific, exact Fatima request. It also raised questions, as it wasn't demonstrably done with clear, explicit unity among all bishops, nor was it explicitly presented as the precise act Mary had specifically asked for. Cardinal Burke, for his part, has remained utterly firm on this matter. He has repeatedly stated, with unwavering conviction, that while many good intentions and partial efforts have indeed been shown, The original precise request made by Our Lady has still not been fulfilled exactly as it was meant to be. He has emphatically emphasized that what heaven asked for was not a general prayer or a vague intention, but a very precise, distinct act, one that explicitly includes naming Russia directly and doing so together in absolute unity with every bishop around the world in one unified voice. Only then, he argues, can we truthfully say that the consecration has been completed precisely as requested by heaven itself. Because past consecrations have not fully, precisely matched the exact request made at Fatima, many faithful Catholics today are left with a pressing, almost agonizing question. Will Pope Leo finally be the one to complete what has been asked for so long, for over a century? After more than 100 years of waiting, of partial efforts and diplomatic hesitations, will he be the Pope who courageously steps forward and speaks the exact words Our Lady requested, clearly naming Russia, and doing so in full, undeniable unity with the bishops of the entire world? This act, though seemingly simple in its outward appearance, carries immense, deep spiritual meaning and profound historical weight. The faithful wonder, with hopeful anticipation, whether Pope Leo will seize this unique opportunity to respond directly, unequivocally, to heaven's urgent message, not with vague intentions or partial efforts, but with a bold, obedient, and completely unreserved heart. Will he choose radical clarity over cautious compromise, conviction over political expediency? Or, like the popes who have preceded him, will his time in the papacy pass with only partial gestures, with words that fall short, with actions that stop midway, and a continued, unsettling silence around one of the most serious and direct requests ever given to the Church by heaven itself? For many who deeply believe in the urgency and the truth of the Fatima message, this question is not just about obscure tradition or esoteric theology. It is, quite literally, about the future of the world. The stunning promise of peace, as explicitly spoken by Our Lady in 1917, remains, in their view, tragically unfulfilled. And until the Church responds fully, precisely as requested, that promise still hangs precariously in the balance. The momentous decision, the weight of centuries, now rests squarely with Pope Leo. As the world continues to move through increasingly uncertain, turbulent times, and as the Church itself faces both profound internal confusion and relentless external pressure, the urgent, luminous message of Fatima continues to shine like a steadfast light in the encroaching fog. It is not simply a message consigned to the past, it is a vital, living call that still echoes powerfully today. It calls the Church to return to the foundational truth, to uncompromised clarity. It calls the faithful to unwavering prayer, to fervent supplication. And it calls all leaders, both within the Church and in the world, to act with profound courage, no matter the cost, no matter the worldly consequence. Cardinal Burke's voice, in this vast, often silent landscape, may indeed seem like a lonely one, isolated in its conviction. But it is anything but weak. His warnings are not spoken out of anger, or pride, or a desire for personal recognition. They emanate from a deep, profound, almost visceral concern for the very soul of the Church, the Bride of Christ. He is not calling for division, but for spiritual clarity, not for rebellion, but for unwavering faithfulness to the gospel and to the explicit, heavenly warnings we have been mercifully given. The question many believers are now asking, with hopeful yet anxious hearts, is this: will the current Pope, Leo, finally listen? Will he finally complete what so many before him have only begun, or perhaps only acknowledged in part? Will he respond to Our Lady's precise request, exactly as she asked, without compromise, without further delay, and without fear of worldly repercussions? If he does, the impact, according to the very promise of Fatima, could be truly profound. The conversion of Russia, a nation deeply intertwined with the fate of the world, and an unprecedented, lasting time of true peace would follow. But if the moment is once again missed, if vague language and political caution once again replace clear, obedient action, then what has been left unfinished may, in the unfolding tapestry of history, continue to unravel in even more painful, more terrifying ways. But this is not just about popes, or cardinals, or bishops, or even grand historical events. The message of Fatima is also profoundly for ordinary people, for each and every one of us. It speaks directly to our hearts, especially now, as the world grows ever louder with distracting noise, spiritual distraction, and bitter division. The call from heaven grows more urgent with each passing day. Return to God, return to fervent prayer, return to the unadulterated truth of Christ. Whether or not world leaders or church officials choose to respond fully, each person still has a profound, personal choice. We can choose to live with our spiritual eyes wide open, keenly aware of the eternal stakes. We can choose to pray the rosary daily, precisely as Our Lady asked. We can offer sincere acts of sacrifice and heartfelt repentance, not just for our own souls, but for the sake of a troubled world. We can choose to turn away from sin and confusion and instead walk the narrow, demanding, yet ultimately liberating road of faith. And perhaps most importantly, in these darkening times, we can choose to hope. Because no matter how dark, how confused, how seemingly lost things may become, God has not and will never abandon His church. History shows us again and again that when things look utterly lost, when humanity seems to have strayed furthest, heaven often sends help through unexpected, miraculous ways. Fatima was one of those astonishing moments. It reminded us with breathtaking clarity that Mary, our Blessed Mother, is still intimately with us, guiding us toward her Son, offering her protective mantle, and earnestly asking for our cooperation in bringing about true, lasting peace. The truth is, we may not know exactly what comes next. We may not know with certainty whether Pope Leo will finally fulfill the long-awaited consecration, or whether the unsettling silence around this crucial request will continue. But what we do know, unequivocally, is that each and every one of us can respond right now, today. We can choose to live the profound message of Fatima with open hearts, with faithful, courageous actions, and with an unshakable willingness to stand firm in the truth, even if we find ourselves standing alone. Because in the end, when all is said and done, it won't be nations or politics or titles that matter most. What will truly matter is how we, individually and collectively, answered when heaven called. And so, we pray, we watch, we prepare. Because the promise of peace is still real, and God's boundless mercy is still abundantly available. But heaven, patiently, lovingly, is waiting for us to respond.